Cold wind blew through the narrow alleyways of the alien market district. Shadows moved between glowing neon signs and broken streetlights. A young alien mother, Kari, ran barefoot on the cracked pavement, holding her daughter tight against her chest. The child's skin was pale and hot, her breathing fast and shallow. "Stay with me, Luma," Kari whispered, her voice shaking. Mama's going to find help, but no one stopped to help her. Vendors pulled their stalls away, guards turned their heads, and other aliens stepped aside like she was a disease. Kari wore the markings of a low-caste worker, and everyone knew it. To them, she was invisibly or worse, disposable. Her child coughed, a dry, painful sound that made Kari wince. She pushed forward, her legs weak. Her arms numb from carrying her daughter so long. She reached the main gate of the upper sector. Where the human outpost began, 2 large alien guards blocked the entrance. "With energy pikes, you can't go through," one said, not even looking at her. "My daughter is dying," Kari begged. "Please, there's a human clinic inside. They have the medicine. She's not allowed." The second guard replied, coldly, "Rules are rules." Kari dropped to her knees. Her body trembling, she looked up at the sky. The moon's shining bright and uncaring. Tears streamed down her face as her daughter gave a weak cry, then went limp. "No, no, no," Kari sobbed, shaking her gently. "Please, Luma, open your eyes." The guards watched for a moment, then turned away. "Move along," one muttered. "Before someone arrests you." Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from behind the gate. A metal door opened, and a human stepped through. He was tall, rough-looking. With a tactical vest and a tired face, he paused when he saw her and alien mother on her knees, clutching a dying child. His name was Jack, and he wasn't supposed to be there, not at that hour. Kari looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Help us." Jack frowned. Stepping closer, "What happened?" "She's sick," Kari said. "I tried everywhere. No one would help. They said we're not allowed medicine." Jack looked at the child, saw the blue veins on her skin, the fever sweat on her forehead. He had seen this kind of sickness before. It was fast, deadly, and it didn't care about caste or species. He looked at the guards, then back at Kari. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You'll get arrested." "I don't care," Kari whispered. "Just save her." There was silence. Only the hum of city lights and the sound of Luma's ragged breath. Jack clenched his jaw, his instincts screaming at him to walk away. But something deep inside him, something human, refused to ignore her pain. He bent down and picked up the child carefully. "She's burning up," he muttered. "Come with me," the guard shouted. "Hey, you can't do that." But Jack ignored them and walked through the gate with Kari behind him. Inside, the human sector was cleaner, quieter, safer. Kari looked around with wide eyes, like she had stepped into another world. Jack led her through the narrow alleys, behind the checkpoint, keeping to the shadows. Finally, they reached a small, hidden door. With a blinking panel, he punched in a code, and the door opened to a warm, dimly lit room. "This is a safe house," Jack said, laying Luma gently on a cat. Kari rushed to her side, brushing the child's hair away from her face. "She's so cold now," she whispered. "Is that bad?" "It means the fever's breaking," Jack said, checking her pulse. "But she needs medicine fast, or she won't make it through the night." Kari looked at him with desperate eyes. "Do you have it?" Jack shook his head. "Not here. But I know someone who might." He picked up a communicator and made a call. "Riley," he said, "I need you now. It's urgent. I've got a sick alien kid who's dying." There was silence on the other end. Then a tired voice replied, "You know this could get you kicked out of the Corps, right?" "I know," Jack said. "Just come." He hung up and looked at Kari, who was humming softly to calm Luma. "You're risking everything," she said quietly. Jack shrugged. "Yeah, well, maybe it's worth it." The child stirred her fingers. Twitching, Kari kissed her forehead and held her close for the first time that night. She let herself hope. Outside, rain began to fall softly on the rooftops. The night wasn't over yet, but something had changed. A line had been crossed. There was no going back. Jack sat near the small cot, watching the little girl's chest rise and fall. Her breathing was still fast, but at least she was still breathing. Kari hadn't moved from her side. Her hand resting gently on her daughter's chest, Jack glanced at the old clock on the wall, counting the seconds as they passed like drops of water in a storm. Every tick made the silence feel heavier, every breath from the child a reminder of the risk he was taking. There was a soft knock at the door. Then a creak as it opened slowly. An older human man stepped inside, wearing a dark jacket with patches on the sleeves and tired eyes full of warning. "Jack," he muttered, closing the door behind him. "You're serious about this?" Jack stood and nodded. "The girl's burning up. Riley? She's not going to make it unless we act fast." Riley walked over and gave Kari a short look. Not cold, but cautious. Then his eyes fell on the girl, and his expression changed. He knelt beside her and placed a scanner on her forehead, watching the numbers flicker. "Septic fever, stage 3, he whispered. "She's got less than 12 hours. Kari's voice cracked. "Can you help her?" Riley looked at Jack again. "I can't get that kind of medicine through legal means. Not for an alien. Not without 5 levels of approval." Jack stepped forward, his tone firm. "Then we go off the books." Riley hesitated. Then finally sighed. "There's someone I used to know. A smuggler, works out of the old transit tunnels." Kari's eyes widened. "You'll help us?" Riley glanced back at the child, then slowly nodded. "If she dies, it won't be because I stood by." They moved quickly. Bundling Luma in warm cloth and placing her gently in Kari's arms, Jack handed Kari a gray cloak. "Keep your head down, don't talk to anyone." The streets outside were still slick with rain. The sky covered in low, heavy clouds. They stayed in the shadows, cutting through narrow lanes where human security rarely patrolled. Every sound made Kari flinch. Every drone passing overhead made her heart stop for a moment. After 20 minutes, they reached an old service hatch near the edge of the cities foundation. Riley tapped on it 3 times, paused, then tapped again. It creaked open, and a single red light blinked from inside. A voice called out, "Password, Stormglass." Riley said firmly. The door opened fully, revealing a short alien with wrinkled purple skin and tired yellow eyes. "Well, well," he said, looking Jack and Kari over. "Didn't think I'd be seeing your face again, Doc. We need medicine." Riley replied. For a child, the alien narrowed his eyes. "You know what that costs?" "I'll pay," Jack said, reaching into his coat and pulling out a credit stick. "Everything I have." The smuggler examined the girl for a moment, then motioned them inside. They walked through a damp corridor lined with crates and old tech. The smell of oil and rust thick in the air. In the back room, the smuggler pulled out a case and opened it slowly, revealing a vial of glowing green liquid. "This'll stop the fever," he said, "but it won't save her alone. You'll need to dose her again in 8 hours." Riley took the vial and nodded. "It's enough to start." As they turned to leave, the smuggler held up a hand. "Word of warning," he said darkly. "People are looking for her. The mother, she broke caste boundaries. That kind of thing doesn't go unnoticed." Jack stared at him. "We'll handle it." Kari said nothing, only held her daughter closer, her eyes filled with quiet fear as they left the tunnel and stepped back into the night. Jack couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He turned just in time to see a shadow disappear behind a crumbling wall. He didn't tell Kari, didn't want her to panic. The safe house was still intact when they returned, though the lights flickered from a power surge. Riley quickly filled a syringe and knelt beside Luma, injecting. the medicine into her arm with steady hands. The girl twitched, her eyes fluttering, but didn't wake. "She's strong," Riley said softly. "But we'll know more by morning." Kari sank down beside her. Whispering prayers in a language Jack didn't know, Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning the door. Something had shifted in the air. Like danger was already on its way. He didn't care. He'd crossed the line, and now he would finish what he started. The storm had passed by morning, but the air still smelled like metal and smoke. Inside the safe house, silence held everything in place like a fragile glass shell. Jack sat on a stool by the window, staring at the street below with bloodshot eyes. He hadn't slept, not even for a minute, behind him. Kari slept lightly with Luma in her arms. The girl's skin was no longer burning, but her breathing was still uneven. Jack had seen enough wounded soldiers in his life to know one dose wasn't enough. They had 8 hours left to find the second vial. Maybe less if her condition turned again. He heard footsteps, slow and heavy, then the sound of the door unlocking. From outside, Jack stood immediately, hand on the weapon strapped beneath his coat. The door creaked open and Riley stepped in, closing it behind him fast. His expression was sharp, mouth tight. Like he'd seen something bad. "They're looking for her," he said, voice low. "The guards have her name, her image, everything." Jack's jaw clenched. "How?" "Someone saw us near the tunnels," Riley replied. "Word is spreading fast. And they're calling it a caste violation." Kari opened her eyes slowly, as if she already knew what Riley was saying. "They'll take her from me," she said. Voice barely above a whisper. "Even if she lives, they'll tear us apart." Jack looked at her, then looked at the child. "No one's taking her," he said. "Not while I'm here." They had one option left: get to the human supply depot outside the inner district. It wasn't legal to bring alien civilians in, but Jack wasn't planning to follow rules anymore. He gathered a map from the drawer, laid it on the table, and traced a path with his finger. Through the maintenance corridors, past Checkpoint 9, under the collapsed bridge. He murmured. Kari came to stand beside him, her hands trembling, but her eyes steady. "You've done too much already," she said. "This isn't your fight." Jack didn't look up. "It is now." Riley handed him a small chip, encrypted with supply data. "This will get you into the depot," he said, "if you're caught." "I don't know you," Jack nodded, pocketing the chip without a word. They wrapped Luma tightly, shielding her tiny face from the cold wind outside. Kari moved like someone with no more tears left. Just silent strength and fear they left before. The sun climbed too high, slipping into service tunnels lined with flickering lights and dripping pipes. Jack walked ahead, one hand always near his weapon. Kari followed close, holding Luma against her chest. Twice they heard voices above them, guards. Searching door to door, shouting her name, Kari froze every time. Pressing herself against the wall, her heart pounding like a drum. By the time they reached the outer tunnel near the depot, Kari's legs were shaking. Jack looked at her, then reached out and took Luma from her arms. "I'll go in alone," he said. "They'll never let you near the entrance." Kari nodded, breathless. "I'll wait here, please." "Just bring it back." Jack moved fast, his boots splashing in shallow puddles as he slipped through a broken gate. The depot wasn't heavily guarded, but it was watched. He walked in like he belonged there. Face calm, eyes scanning every detail. He handed the chip to a clerk who barely looked up. "This order's flagged," the clerk said. "Who approved this?" Jack leaned forward and lied with ease. "Commander Rusk, Section 14. The clerk blinked, then shrugged. "Fine, just sign here." 10 minutes later, Jack walked out with a cold pack in his hands. One more vial, 2 more hours of life. He was halfway back to the tunnel when he felt it, someone watching him. Someone following. He didn't stop, didn't turn around, just walked faster and ducked into the nearest alley. Footsteps quickened behind him. Then a sharp voice shouted, "Human, stop." Jack didn't stop. He broke into a run, dodging between crates. Turning sharp corners, breathing hard, he heard boots pounding behind him. Shouts echoing across the walls. The pack was still in his hand, pressed tight to his chest. He had to make it back. He had to. Finally, he reached the broken gate and slipped inside the tunnel. Kari was waiting, her eyes wide when she saw his face. "Go," Jack shouted. "We have to move now. They're coming." They ran, Kari holding Luma again, Jack close behind. No time for fear now. It's only motion, only urgency. The only thing that mattered was what Jack carried, the last chance for a little girl's life. And somewhere behind them, sirens began to wail. Rain started to fall again as they reached the abandoned train shaft, hidden behind layers of collapsed metal and forgotten stone. Each drop tapped against the concrete like a clock counting down the time Luma had left. Jack led the way, pulling aside old wires and broken panels while Kari held her daughter tighter than ever. Luma stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, her fever returning like a shadow slipping back into the room. They found a narrow path leading toward the old service tunnels beneath the city. Riley had told them about it years ago when smugglers used it to hide refugees during the border wars. Jack had never thought he'd come back here, not with a dying child and a mother who looked like she hadn't slept in days. He paused, listening to the wind whistling through cracks in the wall. There were voices far behind them now, echoing like ghosts. They were being hunted. And the hunters weren't going to ask questions. The tunnel was dark, wet, and filled with the smell of rust and old chemicals. Kari stumbled once, catching herself on the wall. Jack turned around and took Luma from her arms without saying a word. He slung the child against his chest, wrapped in his coat, her tiny hand clutching at his collar. "She's getting colder," Kari whispered, her voice cracking. "Jack." "What if no?" Jack snapped. Not out of anger, but urgency. "Don't finish that thought." They kept moving, breath heavy, boots splashing in puddles. Jack's mind ran through backup plans, escape routes, every possible way out if things went bad, but the problem was they were already out of time. A faint red light flickered up ahead, blinking slow and steady like a heartbeat. It was the marker Riley said would signal the final checkpoint, the hidden med station, as they reached the metal door. Jack pounded 3 times with the side of his fist. Nothing happened. He hit it again, harder this time. His voice low and urgent. "Open the damn door." There was a hiss of steam, and the door slowly cracked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room lined with shelves of supplies and a single old medical unit. An alien woman in a medic's uniform looked out, her eyes cautious and cold. She stared at Kari, then narrowed her gaze at Jack. "You brought her here?" She asked sharply, "Do you know what you're doing?" "She has a child," Jack said, stepping in, "and she's dying." The medic hesitated, glancing toward a console, blinking with alerts. "If they trace you here, this place is finished," she warned. "Then save the girl first," Jack said. "We'll deal with the rest later." The medic moved quickly, pointing to a cot in the back. Jack laid Luma down gently, while Kari hovered beside her, whispering her name over and over like a spell. The medic opened the pack, checked the vial Jack had risked his life for, then injected it into Luma's side. The child flinched, then went still, her chest rising slower now, but stronger, steadier. Kari sank to her knees, tears falling silently down her cheeks. Jack backed away, his hands shaking, realizing for the first time how close they had come to losing her. The medic began scanning Luma's vitals, frowning as data filled the screen. "She make it through the night," she said at last, "but her body's weak. Any more stress and—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Kari reached out and took Jack's hand in hers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. Jack nodded but didn't speak. He didn't feel like a hero, not with sirens still echoing above them and search parties growing closer every hour. All he knew was that he wasn't done, not yet, because Luma had a chance now. And he would make sure nothing took that away from her again. The quiet in the hidden med station didn't last. Barely an hour had passed since Luma had stabilized when the first warning came. A vibration through the walls, soft at first, then sharper, more focused. Kari looked up from where she sat beside her daughter, eyes wide. Jack had already stood, moving toward the entry door, like a shadow sensing fire. Outside, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Heavy boots hitting the ground with purpose. The medic checked the scanner by the door and froze. "There's a patrol team outside," she said quietly. 3 guards. 1 officer. Jack's voice came low and fast. "Are there cameras?" "No, not down here," she replied. "But if they search this far, they'll find us." Kari was already wrapping Luma in the blanket, holding her close too. Her chest again. "She can't be moved too much," the medic warned, her systems still weak. Kari met Jack's eyes, fear and determination mixing in her gaze. "If we stay, they'll take her," she said. "If we run, she might not survive the strain." Jack looked around the room quickly, his mind scanning for anything useful. There was one path left, a sealed waste tunnel that connected to the edge of the old transport network. It hadn't been used in decades, full of rusted piping and gas leaks, but it led directly toward the human refugee lanes. Where guards couldn't follow without official orders, he turned to the medic. "Open the waste access." "You're insane," she whispered. "That tunnel's barely stable." "We don't need stable," Jack replied. "We just need 10 minutes. The medic hesitated, then slammed her hand on the wall console. A hidden panel opened with a hiss, revealing a round metal hatch covered in dust. Jack opened it and coughed as a wave of sour air hit him. He moved back to Kari and took Luma from her arms again, holding the child carefully as he climbed into the tunnel first. "Follow me. Stay low. Don't stop no matter what you hear." The tunnel was narrow and dark, water dripping from the ceiling and broken wires hanging like vines. Jack led the way with a small flashlight attached to his jacket. Kari crawled behind him, her hands scraping along the corroded floor, eyes focused on the shape of her child. Ahead, the noise above faded slowly, replaced by the gurgling of old pipes and the sound of their own breathing. Time lost all meaning in that tunnel. Only fear and movement remained. Then, without warning, a loud crack sounded from the ceiling. A chunk of metal fell between Jack and Kari, smashing into the floor with a crash. Kari screamed, and Luma stirred in Jack's arms, whimpering in pain. Jack reached back, grabbed Kari's arm, and pulled her through the debris. "We don't stop," he growled. "We're too close now." They kept moving until a faint blue light appeared at the far end of the tunnel. Jack's heart pounded faster, not from fear this time, but hope. They reached a broken grate and crawled through into a larger corridor lit by overhead glow strips. On the other side of that corridor was safety. The refugee sector, guarded by humans beyond the reach of Kari's caste law. But as Jack helped Kari to her feet, a voice shouted behind them, "Stop right there." For alien guards stood at the mouth of the tunnel, weapons raised. Kari backed away slowly, shielding Luma with her body. Jack stepped in front of them, his jaw tight, his hands empty. "We're not going back," he said, his voice steady. "She needs treatment. The child will die. She's an illegal," the officer growled. "That child's birth was unauthorized." Jack's eyes darkened. "I don't care," he said. "She's a child." Behind them, a door opened, and 2 human soldiers stepped out of the refugee corridor, rifles in hand. One of them recognized Jack instantly and raised his voice. "That's Sergeant Harper," he said. "What the hell is going on here?" The alien guards hesitated, their faces uncertain. Jack took a slow step backward. Motioning Kari toward the soldiers, "Let me pass," he said, "or make this a bigger war than you want." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the alien officer lowered his weapon just an inch, his mouth curling in disgust. "Take them," he said coldly. "They're your problem now." Jack didn't wait for him to change his mind. He carried Luma past the checkpoint, Kari holding on to his arm like she'd never let go. Behind them, the guards faded into the darkness. Ahead, the light grew warmer. Luma opened her eyes again, just for a moment, and whispered something soft. Kari smiled through tears. Pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead, "She's going to make it," she said. Like a promise carved into the air, and Jack, bruised and breathless, believed her. The walls of the human sector felt different, warmer, safer, but still tense. Jack knew this wasn't the end. It was just another kind of battlefield. Luma was resting again, her face less pale now, her tiny chest rising gently under the soft hospital blanket. Kari sat beside her, barely moving, holding her daughter's hand like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The small clinic room was quiet, except for the hum of machines and the soft footsteps of human medics walking past. The door outside, the city was reacting. News had started to spread not from the official networks, but through whispers, side streets, private feeds. A human soldier had broken caste law, crossed boundaries, carried an alien child into safety. Some were angry, shouting about protocol and consequences, but others were listening more closely, especially the ones who had lost something too. They remembered children who didn't survive, not because of war, but because someone in power said, "Not our problem." Jack stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes on the skyline. A message flashed across his comlink quarters to report to command, to explain, to answer for what he had done. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned as Kari softly called his name. "She's sleeping," she whispered, her fevers gone. He walked over, looked at Luma's peaceful face, and felt something heavy lift from his chest. But there was no time to celebrate. Outside the room, Riley appeared, holding a datapad and looking more tense than ever. "You've started a storm," he said. "They're calling it a violation of neutrality agreements. They want to take Kari and the child into custody." Jack didn't flinch. "They'll have to come through me." Riley lowered his voice. "They're not sending guards this time, Jack. They're sending politicians." An emergency hearing was scheduled, pressure rising from both alien councils and human command. Jack was summoned to testify, but he refused to leave Kari and Luma instead. He sent a single message out across the refugee broadcast channel, one that couldn't be ignored. "I didn't rescue a criminal," he said, staring into the camera. "I carried a child who was dying, and no one else would move. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't." He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He just spoke the truth, and the silence that followed was louder than any alarm. Within hours, the video was everywhere, passed between devices, whispered in backrooms, shared in school halls, and slowly, the conversation began to change at the clinic. Strangers began arriving quietly, not in protest, but with food, clean blankets, small toys wrapped in cloth. No one said much. They just came and left, but their presence meant everything. Even some of the human guards began to soften, no longer looking at Kari with suspicion, but with quiet respect. Jack never left Luma's side, not once. When reporters tried to enter, he blocked the door. When soldiers came with questions, he gave them silence. One evening, just before lights dimmed, Luma woke with clear eyes. She looked at her mother, then at Jack, and for the first time, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. Kari broke into tears, covering her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Jack sat down beside them. feeling the weight of days without sleep pressing down on his shoulders. "She's stronger than all of us," he said softly. Kari nodded, brushing her daughter's hair back. "You gave her that strength." But Jack didn't answer. He was already thinking ahead because survival wasn't enough anymore. Now, they had to make sure no one else would be left behind like this again. Morning light spilled through the clinic window, soft and golden, the kind that made everything feel calmer, even when the world outside was far from it. Kari stood by the edge of the bed, brushing her daughter's hair with careful fingers. Luma was awake now. Really awake, her eyes alert, her smile stronger. Her tiny fingers gripping her mother's hand with a strength that hadn't been there before. Jack watched from the doorway, leaning against the wall, exhaustion clear in every line of his face. But he didn't complain, didn't move, didn't blink. He just watched her breathe. And in that small rhythm, he saw everything he had fought for, outside the room. Voices buzzed through the corridor, diplomats, commanders, reporters, all scrambling. For statements, for images, for someone to blame. But inside that little room, the noise didn't matter. This was about a mother and her daughter, and a man who had decided that saving them was worth every rule he'd broken. Later that day, a human official came to speak with Jack. She was calm, sharp, and professional, but her tone was careful. "There's pressure to hand them over," she said plainly. To smooth things over with the Alien Council, Jack didn't even look at her, just replied quietly. "And what happens when the next child needs help?" The official didn't answer, but she left something behind, a sealed passcard. One that granted safe passage out of the city, no questions asked. Jack walked back into the room, showed the card to Kari. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked down at Luma, who had fallen asleep again, her tiny hand curled around a blanket edge. "Will we be safe?" she asked softly. Jack nodded. "There's a human colony beyond the mountain sectors. They take in refugees. No caste law, no inspections, just people trying to live." Kari looked back at him, her eyes full of something deeper than gratitude. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said. "But you did." Jack shrugged slightly. Someone had to. They left that night, quietly, with Riley giving them directions through a private escape route beneath the transit station. No cameras, no guards, just a silent path toward a new life. As they reached the loading dock, Kari turned back to face Jack one last time. "I don't know how to repay you," she said. "You already did," Jack replied, glancing at Luma. "She's breathing." Then, without another word, Kari stepped onto the transport shuttle. Luma wrapped in her arms, the door closed behind them with a soft hiss, and the shuttle rose into the dark sky, disappearing into the stars. Back in the city, things didn't change overnight. But stories began to spread about a human who carried a dying alien child across enemy lines. About a mother who broke caste law not for power, not for rebellion, but for love, and slowly. People started to ask questions they hadn't dared ask before. Jack returned to his duties, but nothing felt the same. He wasn't a soldier anymore. Not really. He was something else now, something harder to define. And whenever he passed the clinic, he paused, just for a moment, remembering the child who smiled at him like he was the whole galaxy. Some said what he did was foolish. Others called him dangerous, but to one little girl, he would always be the reason the stars didn't fade, and that, Jack thought, was enough.